What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction. Back with a trance reaction. I'm inclined to call it Goa-trance because that's what I think most people would classify this as, though to me it has an even more narrow designation, which is desert-trance. So Goa-trance, psytrance, I've talked about this a lot. Different people might define those two terms synonymously or as one being the offshoot of the other, which is kind of how I see it. At the very least, I do think there are slightly different characteristics, especially over time, because by the time you get to the early to mid 2000s, I think psytrance had become very different from what 90s Goa-trance had been. But the reason I call this desert trance is twofold. One, this is very much the kind of track that I heard at the early desert parties that initially my brother took me to, and then eventually I started going to on my own in the Southern California area. And even though I would eventually go to more like downtown LA warehouse type parties, I'd say of the first 10 rave parties I went to, maybe 7 or 8 of them were these outdoor desert slash forest neo hippie type of trance slash Goa slash psy parties. I also call this desert trance because there was a Southern California rave crew called Moon Tribe, and they had a number of DJs that played at their events, like, you know, the sort of resident DJs of Moon Tribe, a couple of whom also dabbled in production, but they also held these events throughout Southern California and eventually released a handful of CDs, and I forget the label. I think Moon Tribe was like, you know, the series. I'm not sure it was actually the label as well. But anyway, there was one of these CD releases. It was, you know, a DJ mix, but CD, which at the time was kind of novel. Like, that was when mixtapes were still the ubiquitous format for DJs to put out mixes on. But still, in the second half of the 90s, you started to see more CD mixes where, you know, the tracks would be, like, in the middle of a transition, it would, like, kick over to the next track on the CD. But there was one by DJ Brian called Hard Desert Trance, like all one word, Hard Desert Trance. And this track, Sessions, by Cruzeman, whose real name is Roland Klinkenberg, I think maybe from the Netherlands, which I say because the original version of Sessions came out on a Dutch label in '96. This is from a UK label, Quad Communications. I think it's Quad Communications. Definitely Quad. In 1997, so it came out a year later, and it's called Sessions The Mixes, or Mixes, but I'm actually just going to listen to the original version, which I think is better than both of the remixes, which are decent, you know, nothing wrong with them, but it's all about the original here. In any case, yeah, Hard Desert Trance, the DJ Brian mix CD, featured this tune, which is, I think, the first place I heard it. So I call it Desert Trance because it reminds me of going to those early parties, and because it was literally on a CD called Hard Desert Trance. So that's all set up. The tune has acid. It's very atmospheric. It actually makes me think of going to a desert party, but like around sundown, like before the night has really gotten going, before you get to the, you know, the main part of the night, you know, the midnight 1 a.m. set. This makes me think of seeing the California desert sun go behind the foothills and, you know, sort of the orange sky turning into black as it gets into nighttime. So that's kind of the visual I have of this one. I don't actually know if I ever heard this at a desert party specifically, but because I went to those kind of parties, because I had that Hard Desert Trance CD, it fits like that visual image in my mind. So let's give it a listen. This is by Cruzeman, aka Roland Klinkenberg, the track Sessions, which, as I said, is originally from '96, though this mixes version of the record came from '97 on a UK label, but as I also said, we're listening to the original mix. Lurking, menacing bass line. Kick drum sneaking in the back door. the bass line is in tandem with that kind of metallic drum hit. Definitely do a long transition from this into the next record. And I do like those transitional electronic transistor type moments, which it begins the track with. It features prominently along the way. Especially I enjoy the second one and the fourth one, which lead into that heavy, like, really sharp electrical acid work section, or sections plural. And then the third one, the middle one of those transistor transition moments, I love the way it leads into that kind of cerebral, reflective, like, middle section, which is a bit less intense and a bit more up in your headspace, which, again, you go to rave parties, especially like outdoor rave parties, you know, there's times where you're, you know, whether you're looking up at the stars or you're looking at a sunset or a sunrise, depending on when it is, there's a real, like, you're out in nature kind of feel to it. Obviously, you know, it's a different sort of vibe than being in a, you know, an underground warehouse somewhere, but ultimately the chronology of this track I enjoy a great deal, and I enjoy the parts. Again, that deep bass line churning for most, if not the whole tune, There's that kind of electronic, metallic rattle which comes in pretty quickly and which you heard again on the way out very distinctly. There's, of course, the acid work, both like a kind of rhythmic, squelchy acid line and then that real sharp, like, shredded acid work that comes in after those rising, like, transitional segments. And yeah, then there's like a bleepy kind of melody, like higher and like bleep computerish, and that one has a certain, like, fluidity to it. And then there's a related melodic line, like deeper and lower, and that one I think sort of it gives nice verticality to the melodic sound of the lead line of the track. So yeah, it's a top tune. Again, it's impossible for me to disentangle from Southern California desert parties, but again, if you were in the UK or the Netherlands or wherever, you know, you might have different associations with this one. But as I said, I think maybe most commonly this would be called Goa trance, which I think it is, but even more narrowly, it's kind of like desert Goa psytrance to me. So it's like my brain just kind of puts it in a very specific category. But yeah, I think it's a top tune. It takes its time. I mean, a lot of trance and techno is long. This one is over 10 minutes, meaning this video is probably already like 16, 17 minutes or something, so I'll try to wrap this up quickly. But yeah, it takes its time. I think, you know, a lot of possibilities for mixing in and mixing out. In fact, I think DJ Brian on that Hard Desert Trance mix, I think he does like a, right at the end of a measure of the outgoing record, I think he throws it straight over to the intro here with that, again, big rising transitional segment at the beginning of the record. So he actually doesn't like double drop the records at all. I think he just does like a straight slide over with the crossfader. But yeah, lots of mixing in and mixing out opportunities, and I also think you could end a set with it, you could begin a set with it. It's very versatile in that regard. And yeah, it's a tune kind of linked to my classic memories of going to rave parties, even if, as I said, I don't know if I ever heard it at a party, but it was on a CD that I listened to a lot in the early days. One last note, when this was originally released on that Dutch label in '96, it was actually sessions with like the written character for like, you know, it wasn't written in English. It's like the, not like pictogram, but it's like that, you know, very, you know, you see people with tattoos with it, but that character and then sessions. On this Mixes follow-up record from a year later, it's just written as OHM, like sessions. So that's the way I'm going to write it in the video title here, but it is, as I said, originally like the symbol and then sessions, just for a bit of trivia, should you ever have to answer a Jeopardy question about this. In any case, from Luca, who, as you might have seen, got a little startled when the record like slipped off the cushion of the chair and kind of went to the backing of the chair, but she has obviously gotten over that and is sleeping soundly. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time. Peace.